Hey everybody, Ray here. My granddaughter is really into Harry Potter. She's 8 years old these days, and my son bought her this nice wand. It's actually Hermione's wand, if you know that character from the Harry Potter's book. And what he asked me to do was to make a nice box to put it in. So that's what we're going to do today. It's going to be pretty simple, so if you'd like to see how I do this, stick around and I'll show you. I have some maple laying around the shop that's kind of pretty. It's got some knots in it, little bird's eye-like pieces. The end of it here is a live edge, and it's very pretty. So we'll use this live edge and this as the top. And then for the bottom, I will just put a piece of little plywood in there, and I'll show you how I do that. So the first thing we're going to do is take the pieces that we're going to use for the long sides, and I'm going to cut a 45-inch bevel on one side. Now essentially what I want to try to do is to get the inside dimensions of my box to be about the same as the inside dimensions of this box that it came in, because then I can reuse this piece, this foam piece that the wand sits in. So after I've cut that first 45-degree angle, I can simply hold it up to the box and then put a little tick mark as to where I need to cut that other inside 45 degree. And that's going to be right about there. And that'll be close enough. We don't have to be too crazy with our measurements here. But once I've done that, then I want to make sure that I set a stop block so I can do this one exactly the same way. Now I've made that tick mark where I want my 45 to be cut. Here's my 45 going this way, so I want this 45 going this way. And remember, this is the inside of that 45. Now I have my 45-degree crosscut sled here that I made. So I know that all I have to do is line that line there. If I put that right on the edge of where I've cut my groove for my saw, I know that's going to be the inside edge. Unfortunately, I want to repeat this and get that exact same cut on the second piece. And it's too long for my stop block. So I'll show you a little trick what we're going to do here. I'm going to go ahead and line my board up so I know where I want my cut to be, and then I've just got this L-shaped piece right here, and I'll slide that under my board that I'm going to use to cut the 45. And I'll just now clamp that, and this becomes now a temporary stop block. So we'll go ahead and cut this other 45. And we know we want our second piece cut exactly the same length. So now we have our two side pieces cut, and they are, in fact, exactly the same length with the help of our little temporary stop block here. That's kind of a good little trick. This 45-degree miter sled that I made for making picture frames and boxes and so forth, I will reference the video to this below. Now in this case, I can use my stop block. So I've set it up so the line that I marked on the board is again lined up with the groove here where I know my saw blade will be. And then I've set my stop block. So now I can cut both of my sides at the same time. So we have the sides cut to our box, and they fit together really well. The mitered angles are just perfect. And they are because, number one, I built that sled. And again, I encourage you to look at the video about how to do that sled because it makes a big difference. It makes this box making activity or frame making activity go a lot faster. So that sled is made specifically to do things like this and cut things at a 45. But I always, when I set it up, make sure that my blade to my saw is set appropriately. So what I do is I'll set it up to where I think it needs to be to have exact angles, and then I'll cut a little practice box, and I'll make sure that the seams align all the way along here and that the edges are nice and tight fitting. If they're off a little bit, then I can adjust that blade just a micro amount to get it back into perfect. Once I've done this on my test box, then when I move forward to make my other boxes, I know they're going to be just fine. Now, if you recall, I said that what I was going to do is I was going to have a little plywood bottom to this box that will fit into grooves that are on the inside of the sides of the box. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to mark my corners here with a pencil on the inside of the box as it sits on the little 1/8-inch piece of plywood that I'm going to use for my bottom. I know that this is the inside dimension of my box. So if I come in, if I make my grooves a little less than 1/4 of an inch, then I can make this cut here 1/4 of an inch this way more and 1/4 of an inch this way more, slightly less than that 1/4 of an inch, and this is what will fit perfectly into the grooves of the box. I've set up to cut the grooves in the sides. Now all of the sides I have marked the bottom where I want the grooves to be. And I made sure that I've got these little boards here that I created that are notched, and I made sure that it was slightly less than 1/4 of an inch. So all of them should go through and all of them should be exactly the same and all of them should be cut on the bottom, I hope. So let's give this a try and push these through. Now by moving our saw blade over just slightly, we'll make this groove just a little bit wider. Here's my test piece. You see that it needs to be just a little wider for that test piece to fit in there. All right, there's our groove. It's just a little bit wider. And that piece fits in there just perfectly. Now we will cut the bottom piece out here to fit in the bottom of the box. Okay, so we've cut all the grooves into our sides and our bottom fits in there very nicely. So we can just start putting this little puzzle together. All of our sides go in. Okay, that's what our box looks like with the base in it. Here's the top before I cut it to size, but I wanted to show you that I sanded all the pieces down with a 220 grit and then followed with a 320 grit. After sanding, I cut the top down to size. I wanted it to overhang very slightly on the sides and overhang a bit more on the front where the live edge is. We're ready to start gluing our box up, and I'm going to use this tape trick that I learned some time ago that I think works pretty well. You just line your 45-degree angle boards, placing them end to end. You'll see what I mean when I turn them over. And then you just simply tape it together right on that seam there. And I'm going to do one side one of the short sides and two of the long sides first. I think you'll understand why in a minute. And when I did this, I first just put all three of the pieces up against a nice straight board to make sure that all my edges were lined up this way. Now we can just flip this over. And we'll start putting our glue in here and making these come together. And then I'll slide my base piece in. I've applied glue to all of the 45-degree cuts, and I put some droplets of glue in the groove that's going to hold the base. Now I'm not going to get too excited about too much glue in there because this will be locked in anyway. So now what I can do is I can start to just fold my pieces around the base like that, and that masking tape will help them to come together in a pretty tight, with a pretty tight fit. Now that I've folded three sides around the base, I can put my end piece on. Now I'm going to take a couple of large rubber bands and I'll put them on here, and that should be enough pressure to make sure that those 45-degree angles slide together in a good position. Looks pretty good. Not a lot of glue squeeze out inside there or on the bottom. All of the joints are fitting nice and tightly. So here's the nearly complete box. I've sanded everything down with 220. I'm going to sand it one more time with 320 grit. And I've fit the wand in there. I think it looks great. I think my son will be happy with what I did, and I think my granddaughter will just be ecstatic. So after I get the finish on here, because I think this wood's going to be really pretty, I'll bring you back and I'll show you what that looks like. Well, our box came out really nicely. My granddaughter wanted it to have a color, so I stained it with a Sedona red, and it just really brings out all of the nice features of this maple. I also finished it with 4 coats of just a spray lacquer that you can get in a can at a hardware store. I like working with lacquer sometimes because it dries so quickly. The front came out really pretty, as did the sides. The back, you'll see, has some really nice features to it, as well as 3 hinges across there. The live edge on the front is really, really beautiful. And one thing I did do is when I open it, it's actually not stained on the inside. It's a lighter color, which I thought just kind of brought the inside of the box out just a little bit more. But the main thing is I made it with love for my granddaughter. I always tell my granddaughter, when I make you something like this, you have the only one that exists in the world. No one else can buy anything that looks like this because it was made especially for you. And she always thinks that's pretty special. So you go out and make a box for somebody. Make them feel special. Hey, I hope you liked this video. If you did, hit me with that thumbs up. I always appreciate that. And now for a little magic spell that I put on this box, because unless you're my granddaughter and you know the magic word, there is a wizard in here protecting the wand.